Hey, good morning, all. Josh of Severe Weather. Happy Tuesday to you. Hope everybody's doing well. The weather pattern looks like it's finally going to quiet down here for the rest of the week as our massive storm begins to pull away across eastern Canada. Still some cold air pouring in, a little bit of snow this morning in some of the favored snow belts. But overall, the storm is finally winding down, and it was a destructive one for a lot of us here across New England, across the Carolinas, parts of Florida. As we head into Christmas, we are going to start to see some changes coming, and I'm going to talk about those. The first changes are coming across the western United States. California is going to get in on some very unsettled weather, and then that unsettled weather is going to track east towards Christmas. So I'm going to talk about what to expect for this upcoming weekend travel, what your travel is going to look like, who's going to see snow, who's going to see no. And then we're going to talk about some big changes coming at the start of the new year in the weather across the east. It's been a very mild winter, especially compared to last year, but that looks like it is going to start to flip as we head into January. Let me share my screen and talk about first what I believe will be a big chance for climbing snow in the central and southern United States and the East Coast as we head into January. This time frame probably going to be just after the first of the year. So maybe that first weekend of January, we start to see an increase in snow. But I'm going to talk about how we're going to get there because I think that's pretty important as well. Right now, our water vapor imagery shows big trough across the eastern United States, but you can already see a big building ridge here. So here's the trough. This is where our upper level low is, and everything's kind of pulling away here. All the moisture feed from the tropics is going up into the Atlantic Maritimes. Then you see the colder air pouring in behind it, and that's leading to the colder temperatures here in the southeast this morning. But another storm system barreling into the west. You see this feed of moisture into California. That's going to cause problems, and that's going to go up and over this ridge of high pressure that's going to build eastward. Not what you want to see for a white Christmas when you see a ridge like this. It's actually going to bring us some milder temperatures, but you also see this Pacific moisture in here. That's going to come into play as we head towards Christmas, with it looking like a wet Christmas for some, maybe across this area in here. So I'm going to talk about that here in the coming slides. Let's take a look at where the weather is still impacting us. And you can see a lot of lighter green color. This is flood warnings. Much of New England and the Northeast seeing these flood warnings from all the rain that we had here at the second part of the weekend into yesterday. So river floods are going to continue, unfortunately. We do also have winter weather advisories in purple and winter storm warnings in pink. I expect these will expire later this morning, as the majority of the snow should be winding down here by mid-morning for most of us. There'll be a few spots that still have a little bit of snow into the early afternoon. The other place that I'm now concerned about is the West, especially central and southern California, where we do have flood watches in effect. We also have a winter storm warning across the central Sierra Nevada, and that is going to be where our next storm system moves in. We do have a marginal risk for some flooding today over much of California, mainly the coastal plain, but even into the Sacramento Valley and to the Shasta National Forest. As we head to tomorrow, though, that's when our chances for flooding start to climb in the Los Angeles basin and right on up to the central coast, almost a Big Sur here across California here for our Wednesday. Thursday, though, is going to be the day where we could have potential impactful flooding here in the LA area, Santa Barbara, Malibu, Long Beach, Catalina, a slight risk all the way down to Tijuana, Mexico, and a marginal risk inland into the Inland Empire and all the way to about Palm Desert and Bakersfield, California. The threat for flooding shifts eastward on Friday, excuse me, and now we see the deserts of Arizona and California in that marginal risk for flash flooding. Then that storm is expected to eject eastward here by Christmas Eve, well, by Saturday into Christmas Eve, and our threat for flooding does wind down. Here's a look at why. If you look at the upper level pattern, you see our trough shifting east and a big ridge building in. This is tomorrow. We have our next storm system sliding down the California coast, and the wind flow aloft, this is at 500 millibars, is out of the south. What that does is takes southern moisture and pumps it northward. You can kind of see that here where our upper low is off the coast of California. This is Thursday, but the flow aloft is out of the south here, and that feeds moisture into Southern California and right up the slopes of the mountain ranges here. So that's what I'm going to be watching for you guys here. And as that low shifts a little bit farther east, heading into Thursday night and Friday, you'll see that it sends that moisture into California. Big ridge of high pressure builds across the central and eastern United States. This is going to shut down the supply of fresh cold. It'll still be cold in the areas you would expect to be cold, so there will be mountain snow, but This ridge here heading into the weekend, leading up to Christmas, is unfortunately for those of us that want to see a white Christmas, not gonna cause that at all. A year ago, we had this massive trough digging all the way down into here. This year, complete 180 as we have a big ridge of high pressure. Now, as we head to Christmas Day, you'll see this storm system comes out of the Rockies, and we do have southwesterly flow aloft here. Let me find my pen for you guys here again. And you'll see this big trough right here. What it's going to do is send moisture up into this direction. So in this area in here, probably not a severe weather threat, although I could see some thunderstorms, but more of a heavy rain threat. Whereas this area in here has to deal with a colder rain and some mountain snow. So big ridge of high pressure in place here across the east on Christmas Day. That is going to lead to mild temperatures and unfortunately no chance for snow. But as we head into the last week of the month, we do start to see storminess heading east. Some colder air is going to drop down. When you see this ridge over central Canada, that allows a northerly flow to bring some colder air down into here. So later next week, between Christmas and New Year's, I do think we are going to see some wintry weather here as colder air slides in with moisture feeding in over it. So we've got to keep an eye on the interior of New England and the Northeast, as well as the Great Lakes for potential winter weather. But that's more than a week away. Things are probably going to change some between now and then. The details are going to remain a bit uncertain. So here's today's weather chart, and you'll see things quieting down across the east. Really no supply of any fresh cold air. We do have high pressure over the southeast, keeping it chilly, but overall, pretty tranquil weather pattern here for the next couple of days. Our next storm moves into the west. And as we get into Wednesday, you'll see that rain picking up here across central and southern California, snow in the mountains, but the rest of the country is relatively quiet. As we get to Thursday night and Friday, we are going to see some moisture return across the southern plains. So some rain expected, maybe a few rumbles of thunder across central Texas into Oklahoma as we get to Thursday night and Friday. No severe weather at this point, as this system is pretty progressive and loses a lot of the moisture transport we need to see stronger severe weather. As we head towards this weekend, we do see this low pressure system moving into Arizona, a lot of heavy rain, heavy mountain snow on Friday. But as we get to the weekend, we see everything advances eastward. We'll have heavier mountain snows across parts of Utah, Wyoming, and Colorado, heavier rain showers over Louisiana, Texas, and Oklahoma, but not a lot of severe weather. This first piece spreads eastward, and this is Christmas Eve, and it is going to be a wet Christmas for those of us here on the central Gulf Coast up into the central Mississippi Valley. It looks like snow chances are pretty limited. Around midnight as Santa arrives, if you believe in him, of course. Our best chances for snow midnight on Christmas are going to be across northern Minnesota, over western Nebraska and South Dakota, as well as across the Cascades. But overall, this is a very unwintry look as we head into the start of next week. Christmas Day is going to be wet and chilly over portions of the mid-south into Georgia and northern Florida. We're going to see more rain here as this front moves through, but unfortunately, not really any winter weather to talk about until we get to next week. Then we've got our next trough dropping down and kind of cutting off here over Oklahoma. There could be a little bit of snow by next Tuesday and Wednesday in parts of Oklahoma. A lot of snow potential in California, except at the coast, of course. But our next low pressure system looks like it's going to try to draw some cold air down, but primarily will be a rain. Now, this is potentially by next Wednesday and Thursday, something we have to watch for some wintry, icy precipitation as this colder air sneaks down into New England and the moisture rides up and over it. You have that shallow cold layer that comes in underneath the milder layer. And what that could do is produce some wintry weather. But as far as this being a big snowfall right now, the odds are against it. However, somebody in here could see snow. We could also see a little bit of snow across the Great Lakes later in the week, but that's not our big cold air attack. Looking at the GFS model, we see similar things, but different timing. You will see as we head into the weekend here, this low pressure system is actually cutting up a little bit farther to the north and west, meaning milder air gets up into Minnesota. And Christmas morning, instead of snow in Minnesota, we see rain, and all the snow is back in the western high plains from Nebraska into central North Dakota. Not a very wintry look, but Christmas Day on the GFS is wet and chilly. Places like Atlanta, Georgia, Nashville, Tennessee, Moline, Illinois, all the way up to Madison, just kind of a chilly rain here. Nothing like last year, of course, where temperatures were well below zero. I bet we're going to be talking about 40s for the most part here. So pretty much as nasty a Christmas as it can get here in parts of the Southeast and into the Great Lakes. As we go past that, we see our low pressure system on the GFS, and this is an interesting look. So the Euro cut the low up west of the Appalachians. We saw that a lot last winter. The GFS has it coming up the East Coast and has a pretty intense system with another massive wind event, another massive rain event for New England, unfortunately. And this will be Wednesday into Thursday of next week. It does show heavy snow over the interior of New England, over the mountains, and over northern New Brunswick and southeast Quebec, but shows primarily rain here for the big cities. After this moves out here, we are going to see colder weather by New Year's Eve, and the beginning of next year could start out pretty unsettled. And I do think someone in the plains into the Ohio Valley and maybe even the Mid-South does have the chance to see some winter weather after the first of the year. This is Wednesday the 3rd. This is the GFS. We don't put a lot of trust in a forecast that's 360 hours out, but you can see the pattern does flip, and we start to see more storminess down south and more winter weather chances farther south and east than we've seen so far this winter. So the pattern is going to start to shift probably around the 3rd, 4th, 5th of January, and we are going to start to see a better chance for winter weather farther south. Let's look at the west first here, and we are going to see a lot of rain in the next few days. Rainfall totals in NorCal are going to be generally 1 to 3 inches, with the mountains seeing higher amounts. This is a blend of the models, not an official forecast, but if you look at every model and you blend it, you see the potential between now and next Thursday of 3 to 4 inches of rain from the Bay Area on northward, smaller amounts on the I-5 corridor, generally an inch or less, high amounts as well in the mountains. So a pretty nasty setup here coming. Southern California, though, is going to see more significant rain here, especially as we get into Wednesday and Thursday. And amounts are going to climb in the LA area. And by the end of the week, Los Angeles has the potential to see over 5 inches of rain. And when you get into the burn areas, we do see amounts that go beyond 6 inches to potentially up to 10 inches, depending on which model ends up being correct here. So very wet pattern coming for Southern California, and that rain is going to start today. And those amounts are going to climb pretty quickly Wednesday into Thursday, and even spreading eastward into the deserts. If you look here at Arizona, and southern Nevada, for those of you who may be traveling to the Southwest for this Christmas, it's going to be very wet here at the end of the week. Amounts likely to get over an inch in Phoenix, Tucson, Tempe, Prescott, Flagstaff, and around the Grand Canyon region, around the rim country, we see potentially up to 3 inches of rain. Vegas could see half an inch of rain, but somebody could pick up more, and that could cause brief flooding as well, as that area is not accustomed to seeing heavy rain in just a short amount of time. So keep that in mind if you're traveling to the Southwest. I think Thursday and Friday will be the days we have to be most concerned. The other thing we're looking at is mountain snow. And if you are planning to ski over the holiday season, you'll like what you see here. Potential amounts of 2 to 3 feet of snow expected across the Sierra Nevada, especially the central Sierra Nevada, not so much around Tahoe, but south of there, because the storm track is taking a more southern route. We are going to see some pretty significant snow across the mountains. Parts of Arizona could see over a foot as well. The Colorado Rockies could see 1 to 2 feet, shifting that eastward here a little bit towards the central United States. You'll see some snow potential. Denver area could see 3 or 4 inches here next week. Colorado Springs, 4 to 6 inches. Parker could see 6 inches, but the higher amounts, as you would expect, are going to be in the higher elevations. Pretty pathetic for winter weather. Once you get east of the Rockies, there's some minor amounts expected, parts of Nebraska and the Dakotas and Kansas, but I don't know about Missouri here, maybe with our next system that comes out here on the 27th, 28th. But again, it's not a very good potential for winter weather through Christmas. Now, we are going to see changes. This is the Madden-Julian oscillation forecast. I'm going to show you what this all means. But right now we're in a phase 7, which is pretty mild across the central and eastern United States. As we head towards Christmas, though, we start to look at colder phases of the MJO, heading through phase 8 into phase 1 and 2. And these are more favorable phases to allow colder air to move into the central and eastern United States. Does that mean we're going to have a winter storm right away in the south? I don't think so. I think what we're going to need to see is several days of cold air in place before we start to see the setup for a winter storm. So despite the fact that we're heading into phase 8 and then 1, which would favor colder weather in the east, it may take us until we get into phases 2, 3, and even 4 before we see winter weather. The time frame, this is New Year's Eve. We're into phase 2 potentially, and then early next year, around the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, we start switching into phase 3. That's when I think we're going to see more favorable conditions to see a southern storm, probably once we get into phase 3 and maybe even early phase 4, rather than phases 8 and 1. If you're following, and this probably means nothing to the lay listener, so I'm going to kind of lay it out for you guys here and show you the potential here. I'm sorry this is advancing pretty quickly, but Right now, we're in a phase 7 and 8, which is pretty warm, but we're starting to see colder changes. As we get into phase 1 and 2 here, you'll see this in just a little bit. That is when we're at our coldest. However, we need that cold to bleed down farther south and east. And so we may not see much in the way of wintry weather across the central and eastern United States and the southern parts until we get into phase 3 here. So it's already cold and starting to warm up. And what that means is because the cold air is in place and we're starting to warm up, that warmer transition is where the moisture is coming in underneath that cold air. And that's when our winter storm chances are at their best here, phases 2 and 3. So going back here to phases 2 and 3, that time frame is going to be January 2nd through about the 6th to maybe the 8th. So if you have travel plans here next week, but you're not returning to the Southeast until after the new year, you'll definitely want to be watching me here on Josh's Severe Weather as I break some of that down, because I do think we are going to be seeing that shift coming. Here's a look at why. Here's the jet stream here on the GFS. This is a very mild flow from the Pacific. You see very cold air over China and Japan, but a very active jet stream. And right now with that ridge in the west and the trough in the east, we just don't have the possibility of seeing a whole lot. Now, as we head towards the end of the month here, and we see this more active jet starting to shift eastward and dropping southward. See this amplification here around New Year's Eve? What this is allowing cold air to come in from Northwest Canada, starting to drop down into the eastern United States. It's going to take a while before that moisture gets here, but take a look at this Pacific jet. This is the 2nd and 3rd of January. The cold air is in place. See that 1032 high? That indicates colder air. Now we start to see more action moving into Canada, into Southeast Alaska, and dropping down here. And what this allows is moisture to build from the Pacific and from the Gulf in here. Let me show you the pen here real quick. What this sets up is this direct flow of cold air into the eastern United States. This is January 3rd and 4th, and then a moisture flow coming in. So with a trough here moving into the colder air, that increases our chances for wintry mischief here around the 3rd, 4th, and 5th of January. So that's what I'm going to be watching for you guys here in the coming weeks here. The Arctic oscillation is positive right now, meaning that we're seeing the cold air on the eastern hemisphere side of the world right now. That's going to shift, though, into the western hemisphere once we start getting towards the flip here, towards this first of the year. And I know this is hard to see, so I'm going to bring my pen back out here. This is New Year's right here, and this is when we start to see that drop off. And a negative AO indicates colder air on the United States side here, especially the central and east. And that's highlighted around January 3rd through about the 9th or 10th. So this is the window that we're kind of watching here for potential winter trouble. As we look at the P&A, we also see it positive, which typically favors cold air coming into the southeast. Then it switches over to negative as we get to the 7th and 8th. That stops the flow of cold air coming into the southeast. We're going to see chillier than average southeast temperatures, but we see a flip coming around the 3rd or 4th. It's where things transition is where I think we're going to be in a better shot to see winter weather. So around the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th of January would be the time frame for that to happen. Also, the NAO goes negative. It's positive right now. This is the block in Greenland and in the North Atlantic. When it's positive, we don't have the block. Everything is progressive and storms move out quickly. When it becomes negative, we see that high pressure building back, allowing storms to get trapped on the East Coast or in the Southeast. Once that goes negative around the 31st and 1st, we start to see maybe a better chance to see a big storm on the East Coast once we get to about the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th of January. So I'm watching those ingredients for you. And here is the CFS daily. And you can see we do have cooler than average temperatures and lower than average heights in the Southeast, but a very big, milder pattern here across Canada. Now, as we switch over, we see the mild air over Canada starting to diminish by the beginning of January, and we see these lower heights over New Mexico and Texas. This indicates, I think, more moisture coming out of the Pacific, running into that cooler air mass, and we see this flip coming here. This is around the 6th and 7th. So there'll be some timing differences, but somewhere between, say, January 3rd and January 10th, I think we're going to see a more favorable shot for wintry weather here across the east. And then we see that retrograding and a January thaw coming towards the end of the month. But the first couple of weeks of January are looking a little bit more exciting for us here in the eastern United States for winter weather. We didn't see that at all last winter, really. We didn't have that in place with the La Nina, but the El Nino certainly gives us that possibility. Temperature anomalies are very mild in the northern United States, but they're turning colder as we get towards the first weekend of January, and especially into that January 8th to 15th time frame before we see some milder weather. So big flip coming, but it's going to take us probably another 3 or 4 weeks before that occurs. Looking at the European forecast here, we do see the colder air in the south at the end of the month. So it'll be unsettled. It'll be pretty nasty for New Year's Eve. But as we head into January, much of the rest of the country turns colder. This is the 8th of January, and this is the coldest look we've seen so far this winter. It does eventually break up some, but we at least see better prospects here for at least the first half of the month of January. And here's the extended forecast, seeing that cooler weather in place by early January across much of the eastern United States, much of the West, the only exception being the northern plains. And this is what you would expect to see during an El Nino winter. This is very common. So I expect that we'll see things taking shape here early in January. Finally, precipitation. With the cold air, we need to see precipitation or we just don't see winter weather. You can see above average wetness in the southeast here for the final week of the year, and then dry for a little bit. And then you see all this moisture here across the southern Rockies. We're starting to turn wet again later the first week of the month of January. So in that January 5th, 6th time frame, this favors more wetness over the eastern United States. And we'll have to keep an eye on the southeast for potentially a winter storm somewhere in here if this ends up being correct. Our snow cover extent has not been very oppressive in the northern hemisphere, but we're running about average, despite what you may see out there on the internet, which says we're at a record low. But this is the northern hemisphere, and a lot of this snow cover is on the other side of the world from us, over Siberia, over portions of northern China, over northern Japan, northern North Korea. So we're not below average on snow totals. We're just not seeing it so much on this side of the world yet. However, with that MJO flip, I definitely think we could see that shift coming. This is much different than last winter, when we saw last winter way up in here, a lot more snowpack on this side of the world, and that's what allowed that cold air to come down. So looking at a major Arctic outbreak in the eastern and central U.S., I don't think our chances are great for that. But that doesn't mean we can't see some of that cross-polar flow, bringing that cold air on the other side of the world over the North Pole into our part of the world here in early January. So that's what I'll be watching for you guys. Finally, let's look at snow here. I teased you so much, but let's look at it. And you can see our chances start to climb here. This is January 4th, and this is the average ensemble mean. So by no stretch does this guarantee snow in places like Georgia or Texas or Louisiana, but you can see the line is dropping south in the 7 days. See, there's not much out here right now, but you see that line dropping south after the first of the year. And this is definitely looking more impressive for the Northeast. Give it a couple of weeks here, but as we get to January 4th and on, we definitely see a more favorable pattern for winter weather in the East. And then you'll start to see that line slowly comes right back up here later in the month of January. But January could be a pretty active month here for winter weather. We could see multiple winter storms, and seeing that snow line dropping south is a little bit more promising for those of us that want to see it. So that's all I've got to share with you today, but I hope you all have a wonderful day. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to my channel. This helps me reach more people and get more of my ideas out there. But I very much appreciate your time today. And my end credits include God. I am a Jesus freak. I am a Christian, and I give all the glory to God every day. I thank him every day because of the wonderful gift that he has provided me as a meteorologist. He's provided us all with gifts, whether or not you believe in him, but I pray that you do believe in him. And it is the time of year where we do obviously celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ, our Savior, for those of us who do believe that. But this was prophesied many, many years before. God had told the prophet Isaiah, Isaiah 9, that the people that walked in darkness have seen a great light, that they dwell in the land of the shadow of death. Upon them hath the light shined. Thou hast multiplied the nation and not increased the joy. They joy before thee according to the joy in harvest, and as men rejoice when they divide the spoil. For thou hast broken the yoke of his burden and the staff of his shoulder, the rod of his oppressor, as in the day of Midian. For every battle of the warrior is with confused noise and garments rolled in blood, but this shall be with burning and fuel of fire. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. The government shall be on Jesus's shoulder. What does that mean? Well, we're coming up on election season next year, and a lot of us are unhappy with the government here in the United States. I'm sure in other countries as well. But are we really allowing the right person to govern us? Are we allowing men who are faulty, whatever party you believe in, I don't really care, honestly, because they're faulty people, no matter what you believe? Or are we allowing God through his son, Jesus Christ, to govern us? I've chosen that. Over 10 years of my life, I've dedicated my life to Jesus because I realized that I was putting my worth in the wrong things. God says you are much more worthy than somebody who believes in how much money they make, who they associate with, what they look like, um, and what title they're given. Instead, you can become a child of God believing in Jesus Christ so that one day when your time on earth is gone, you can live eternally in heaven with Jesus Christ. That is the good news, folks, that you can live eternally, because you're going to struggle while you're on earth, but having the joy and knowing that there is peace coming to you one day when you transition to heaven, if you so choose to believe, that that is what truly should bring you joy. And you should share that good news with other folks. And that is what God has called me to do, is to share that good news, that I personally live in joy, even though I go through dark times, that there is light through that darkness, dwelling in the shadow of death, that the light is shining, and that is through Jesus Christ, our Savior. I would love to pray for you today if you are going through a difficult time, if you're struggling in your faith. And please know that I'm here to share the good news, but I'm not here to throw it in your face either. If you don't believe in Jesus, that's okay. If you're not a person who believes in God, that's okay as well. I just want you to see what he has done in me, because I truly believe that that makes a difference in other people's lives as well. So I hope you all have a wonderful day, and we'll chat again tomorrow morning. Have a blessed day. God bless.